Chapter 931 Recall. During the week Zhang Yi was home resting, no one was idle. Zhu Jing urgently recalled all the investigation teams in the Jiangnan region. Any urgent task became less urgent in the face of the key prop, the source of God that could get someone promoted to Epsilon. That day, a figure wearing a tattered cloak and unkempt hair appeared in front of the 30-meter-high massive city wall of Blizzard City. Through long eyelashes, a deeply emotional gaze looked at the seemingly impregnable city walls, which was immediately transformed into a deep sigh. He walked up to the city gate. Under the huge city gate, there was a small door that could accommodate one person to pass through. Before he got close, he was warned by the sound of a robot. "Stop! Please verify your identity." The man thought about it, took out a golden card from his pocket, and held it up. Soon, the robot completed the identification of the person. Heavenly God Squad Captain, Deng Shintong, codename Erlang Shen. The guards at the gate couldn't believe their eyes. The once powerful investigation team captain, the nobleman of Jiangnan, was now dressed like a beggar. But there would be no problem with the robot's verification, so they hurriedly opened the gate and went to greet him. Deng Shintong had been gone from Blizzard City for several months. He didn't bring any subordinates with him, and he didn't report his whereabouts to the Deng family. He was just a man, heading to the most dangerous area in Jiangnan to gain experience. For the first time in his life, he realized the cruelty of the end of the world. Walking alone in the vast expanse of snow and ice, he experienced the crisis of death several times. Even the most ridiculous time, he was resting inside a cave, and was almost killed by a beta-level poisonous snake. If he hadn't carried the antidote with him, he would have become the most comically dead captain in the Jiangnan region. He didn't realize that cold-blooded animals would still be active in the cold season. But soon, he realized the crux of the problem: the era of great mutation had arrived, and the world could no longer be thought in terms of past logic. There were crises everywhere. Walking alone in the outside world was like walking on thin ice. No matter how powerful one was, there was no guarantee of invincibility. This gave him a feeling of fear in his heart. He also quickly understood why there were mutants like Zhang Yi. A few months of hard training had greatly changed his state of mind, and it had also completely changed his fighting style and fighting philosophy. In life and death battles, most of the time, it depended not just on personal strength. Calculation, environment, and even luck were all key factors. Just like in the Colosseum, even without sharp teeth and claws, an adult bison can use its brute strength and sharp horns to kill a lion or tiger. Deng Shintong saw the city guard and greeted them with a smile. Such an amicable attitude even made the city guard feel a little uncomfortable. The leader of the city guard hurriedly and politely asked someone to arrange a vehicle to take Deng Shintong into the city. Deng Shintong did not refuse, as he first wanted to go to the new operations command center to see Zhu Jing. After Deng Shintong had left, the leader of the city guard suddenly let out a sigh. This was the fourth one. All the captains in exile are now here. In the East Sea region, following Li Guangxiao's orders, Li Tianyang arranged an elite investigation team to go to the waters between Star Island and the Morai country to investigate the source of God. The ridiculous thing was that they didn't believe the real destination that Zhang Yi had so plainly provided them with, but instead believed the smokescreen bullet. Naturally, the result was that they found nothing. Since the area was close to Morai, their submarines didn't dare surface either. Therefore, the investigation couldn't be sustained for long. Li Tianyang, however, believed that it was only because the area was so large that it was understandable that they wouldn't get results for a while. He didn't doubt a single word of what Zhang Yi had told him later. After all, at that time, Zhang Yi did not have any supernatural powers, and he drank a truth serum that humans absolutely could not resist. On the other hand, the Sky Dragon pirates. The Sky Dragon King was teamed up by Zhang Yi and Linghu Feishue, who shattered his Mirage Dragon clone and also killed his most capable subordinate, Captain Nerit. This made the Sky Dragon King extremely angry. Before he died, Nerit told him the news he had learned from Zhu Lark. Although he did not know the location of the source of God, Julark vaguely knew that something very important was in the place Li Zongyu had been. Combined with Li Zongyu's identity as a teacher at the Star Island Noble School, this made the Sky Dragon King realize that the source of God was most likely on Star Island. However, although Star Island was small, it was after all a country. Finding a source of energy in a country was also extremely difficult. But for the Sky Dragon King, the source of God was something he must obtain. He had lost so much that he was now experiencing a severe power crisis. When faced with a transcendent power like Columbia or the Huashu Kingdom, he was at the mercy of others. If he wanted to change the situation, he had to break through his limitations and ascend to the rank of Epsilon-class mutant. If he succeeded, even transcendent powers would change their attitude towards him. Therefore, the Sky Dragon King also gathered a group of elite subordinates and began to figure out a way to advance towards Star Island. While the outside world was in turmoil, what was Zhang Yi doing? Compound 3 had a 1-week slow release period. During this time, he stayed at home all the time, teasing the cat and walking the dog. Yes, his family had an additional dog. The dog was owned by Zhou Lingling, Xing Tian's goddaughter, but was now in Zhang Yi's home. It seemed that after biological mutations, creatures would become a little smarter than usual. Flower was as intelligent as a human, while Lele seemed a little dumber, but was already able to understand human language. Liu Karen had built them a translation device. In fact, it was a device that received their brainwaves and then converted them into language. As a result, Flower and Lele both have a black scarf-like translation device around their necks. Flower is still lazy all day long, stretching out and lying on the carpet in front of the burning fireplace. Lele, on the other hand, is a big dog, and his abilities are only at the Gamma level, which is far worse than Flower's. Therefore, at home, he is very clear about his position and tries his best to please everyone. Zhang Yi is sitting on the sofa, with Lele lying at his feet as his footrest. Lele, your name is a bit childish. I don't think it's powerful enough for times like these. How about if you change your name to Black Panther? Woof woof. Lele barked twice, but his big head kept shaking from side to side, obviously not happy with the name. I'll just be called Lele, it's the name my owner gave me. Like it or not, I'll be Lele. Zhang Yi rested the back of his hand on his chin, but if we go out and fight with other people in the future, I'm afraid that after you introduce yourself, they'll just laugh their heads off. Chapter 932, I will act as a lone wolf. No matter what Zhang Yi said, Lele was unwilling to change his name. Although dogs have a lower IQ than humans, their loyalty is unmatched by humans. Zhou Lingling was its owner, so Zhou Lingling called it Lele, and he only recognized this name. Even though Zhang Yi is very powerful and makes it afraid, the basic principles cannot be abandoned. Zhang Yi smiled and rubbed his big head with his foot. This thing is really big, and the key is that it doesn't transform like Flower. So normally it's just a big black plush toy in the room, and it comes with its own thermal insulation. To be honest, it's kind of fun. Just then, Zhang Yi's satellite phone rang. Zhang Yi picked it up and saw that it was a video call from Zhu Zheng. A playful look flashed in his eyes. Now that a week had passed, his supernatural abilities had returned to normal. Zhu Zheng was naturally looking for him for the Star Islands operation The Source of God. Zhang Yi knew that the East Sea region had wasted too much time in the wrong place, and it slowly dawned on him later. But obviously, it would be extremely difficult for them to take it all for themselves. No one was sure because of the movements of the Columbia Navy. Zhang Yi answered the phone and Zhu Zheng's usual kind face appeared in the video. Zhang Yi, how have you been recently? Have you recovered? Any after effects? Zhang Yi said indifferently, I think there are. I've been feeling weak these past few days. I can't muster the energy to do anything. I just want to lie around at home. As soon as Zhu Zheng heard this, he knew that Zhang Yi was fine. He laughed and said, since you've recovered, hurry up and come to Blizzard City. We're waiting for you now. The captain of the investigation team in Blizzard City had already returned, and was waiting for Zhang Yi to come back and hold a strategy meeting to decide on the next move. Hearing the words strategy meeting, Zhang Yi suddenly sneezed for some reason, and a chill ran down his back. Frowning, he asked, "Did you not succeed in the East Sea region? It is already too late for us to set off now. And without the assistance of the East Sea region, we simply cannot break through the blockade of the Colombian Navy." Zhu Jing said with a smile, "This time, even the heavens are helping us." Most of Star Island, especially the area around the Misty Valley, is shrouded in a huge fog that appeared for no reason. The coverage area exceeds 6 cities and more than 20,000 square kilometers. Most of the country is shrouded in fog. This fog cannot be detected by satellites, and it is highly toxic. If you want to explore, you can only use primitive means. Therefore, the East Sea region has not found a good method in a short period of time. Now they are asking for trouble. Not only have they wasted time there, but they have also attracted the attention of the Colombian Navy because of the commotion. So this time, they took the initiative to come to us to cooperate, and they want to form a joint armed force to enter Star Island to find the source of God. Zhang Yi was not at all surprised to hear the news. The Misty Valley was originally a dangerous area shrouded in miasma year-round. Now that there is the source of God, it is no surprise that something has changed. But, cooperating with the East Sea region? Zhang Yi sneered, his face full of disdain, and a flash of disgust flickered in the depths of his eyes. Zhu Jing knew that Zhang Yi was still holding a grudge against the East Sea region for their impolite behavior towards him. He quickly reassured him, "Zhang Yi, this is an extraordinary time. I know that the East Sea region has done offensive things to you. But for now, cooperating with them is our best option. If you really want to get back at them, the only way is to make yourself stronger. Trust me, we will cross paths again. When you are strong enough, sooner or later they will come to you. That is when you will get your revenge. Not now. Because we are indeed not as strong as they are." Zhang Yi was silent for a moment and let out a long sigh. "I understand. I will rush to Blizzard City immediately and do whatever headquarters tells me to." Zhu Jing nodded in relief. "That's the right attitude. When you're away from home, you have to look after your own face, and sulking about being poor is pointless." After the two of them finished talking, the expression of anger and resignation on Zhang Yi's face immediately disappeared. "East Sea region? This time I have all the time in the world, so I can spend some quality time with you guys." He looked at Flower on the sofa and Lele on the carpet, and raised an eyebrow. "We should get going." Zhang Yi said goodbye to the rest of the family. This time, he didn't bring anyone with him, but a cat and a dog. But no one in the family raised any objections. Lu Karen brought Zhang Yi his equipment. Zhang Yi carefully inspected the brand new combat uniform, paying attention to every detail. To describe this combat uniform as being armed to the teeth would be an understatement. It could even be said to be armed to the seams. "It's time to go." Zhang Yi bid farewell to everyone in the family and got into the car with only Flower. As for Lele, due to its large size, it could only run beside them. However, this was no problem for it, as it itself could run through the snow as fast as the wind. As they watched Zhang Yi go, the family members had different expressions in their eyes. Liang Yu's eyes were slightly despondent, but she soon let go. Zhang Yi naturally had his considerations for not taking her with him. In this time, the task of competing for the source of God is a matter of great importance. I'm afraid that even the captains will go out in large numbers. Even if she followed, she would be risking her life. If she was like this, let alone the others. Yang Xinxin's eyes, however, showed a hint of excitement bordering on madness. "This time, brother, you'll give them a good surprise." Zhang Yi brought Flower and Lele to the Jiangnan region. Without having time to rest, Baili Changqing came to greet him as soon as he arrived. After all, Zhang Yi was now the nominal captain of the Tenggu squad, while Baili Changqing and the others were his subordinates. "Captain, you're here. Commander Zhu asked you to go to the Operations Command Center, saying that as soon as you arrived, the high-level meeting would begin immediately. At that time, all the captains of the investigation teams will be there." Zhang Yi nodded. "Yes, I know. Bai Li Changqing looked a little surprised at Zhang Yi's side, and did not see the shadows of Liang Yu or Yang Xinxin, Zhou Qir and the others. He only saw a very large dog and a black tabby cat perched on its head. You didn't bring anyone with you this time? Bai Li Changqing asked curiously. Zhang Yi said indifferently, for this mission, there is no point in bringing more people. Headquarters can send more people over. Because searching for the source of God requires a large number of people and is carried out in the most primitive way. However, Zhang Yi would not let the people around him take risks. Chapter 933, Star Island Operation Combat Meeting. Bai Li Changqing did not dare to ask too many questions. He did not know anything about the source of God, but just by looking at the current situation in Blizzard City, he knew that something big was about to happen. You have to know that even when Eclipse Moon caused the Jiangnan region such headaches, there was no such large-scale recall of all the investigation teams. Bai Li Changqing drove Zhang Yi to the Combat Command Center. As he entered the lobby, he brushed past a man wearing a thick military overcoat. The two men looked at each other without saying a word. The man had a white mask covering his face, making it impossible to see his true appearance. His slender physique was completely hidden by the dark brown military overcoat. Zhang Yi could smell an extremely strong bloody smell coming from him. Bai Li Changqing hurried over and said, "Captain, he is the captain of the Ironblood Squad Li Long." Bai Li Changqing saw that the man's expression was full of apprehension, as if he didn't want to get too close to him. However, Li Long seemed to realize who Zhang Yi was after hearing the two of them talk. He touched his hat with his hand and nodded to Zhang Yi. "You are the captain of the Tengu Squad Chaos? I have heard a lot about you." His voice was hoarse, as if it came from a rusty paint bucket. Zhang Yi nodded. "Mr. Li Long, it's a pleasure to meet you." The two men didn't have time to talk much longer before a dark-haired beauty in professional attire walked over and said with a smile, "Captain Chaos, Captain Li Long, everyone else is already here. Please come to the conference room." Zhang Yi nodded and followed the dark-haired beauty over. Bai Li Changqing was only the deputy captain and did not have the qualifications to attend this high-level meeting, so he stayed below and waited. However, as he passed near the reception desk, Zhang Yi heard a somewhat familiar voice, which seemed to be arguing with someone. He couldn't help but glance over there. It turned out to be an officer who was reporting campaign expenses, but for some reason seemed to be arguing with the clerk in charge of the paperwork. "We are all working for the district. Do you have to be so difficult? We risk our lives every day on missions, and you're here fussing over a few typos and not approving it. You've gone too far, I'm reporting you." But the woman in the gray uniform, who looked a little strange, gave a strange smile. She tilted her head. "Sue me if you want. You don't think anyone will be scared, do you? I'm even more shameless than you think." "What a joy." Zhang Yi was slightly taken aback. He didn't expect Zhu Lark to have now run away to the command center and become a front desk clerk. But looking at her, one could always doubt her mental state. If Zhang Yi didn't know that she had been severely tortured at the hands of the pirates, he would even think that Zhu Lark had been on drugs. In this state, Zhu Lark obviously no longer met Zhu Zheng's standards for a trusted subordinate, and she had been thrown into this position, so she had most likely been abandoned. Now, she could only spend her days making life difficult for others. After all, as a relative of a leader, no one else could afford to take her seriously. Finally, Zhang Yi saw the Yan Yunwei officer leave angrily. He shrugged. "You never know what's going to happen." Zhang Yi and Li Long got into the elevator going up to the upper floors. In a short while, they arrived at the meeting room. The majority of the people sitting here were familiar faces. Tu Yunlai, Deng Shintong, Deng Yuanbo, Zhu Zheng, and others were all here. Ling Ufeishua, like him, also appeared at the scene after the effects of Compound 3 had worn off. Although there was the shame of being captured, Jiangnan was in urgent need of people at the moment, and she was allowed to atone for her crimes by performing meritorious services. However, there were two faces at the scene that Zhang Yi really didn't recognize. Not far from Deng Shintong sat a guy with white hair and a cold, unfriendly face, but one that didn't inspire fear. He looked kind of handsome, and at only 16 or 17 years old, he looked like a middle school student. Opposite him, a dignified woman with gray hair, dressed in black battle armor, and her eyes covered with black cloth was sitting. Zhang Yi couldn't help but wonder. Among these two people, one of them must be the captain of the demon squad. But who was the other person? While Zhang Yi was sizing everyone up, everyone was also sizing him up. Today's Zhang Yi was the strongest person officially recognized by the Jiangnan regional headquarters. Although the strength of a mutant could not be absolutely linked to their ability index, Zhang Yi had saved Zhu Zheng's life and forcefully repelled Gao Changkong head-on, making him the most recognized number one expert. It was hard to say whether the captains present felt the same way. But as the saying goes, fear of being famous makes a pig grow fat. It was only natural that Zhang Yi would attract attention. Zhu Jing smiled when he saw Zhang Yi and said, "Chaos, and Li Long, come and sit down. We've been waiting for you." Strictly speaking, this meeting was mainly waiting for Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi's seat was to Zhu Zheng's immediate left, closest to him. After Zhang Yi was seated, Zhu Jing first introduced the two newcomers to him. The handsome young man with white hair was the captain of the demon squad, codenamed Gluttony. The mysterious woman with a black eye patch was the captain of a newly formed team, the Night Raven squad, and her codename was Spirit Guardian. A newly formed team? So soon? Have they discovered a new captain already? Zhang Yi suddenly realized that during the 5 months he had been away from Jiangnan region, the place had already undergone earth-shattering changes. It was only natural that things had changed. Zhang Yi didn't dwell on it, but lightly asked, "The meeting is in such a hurry, is there any news?" Zhu Jing nodded. "Basically, everyone here already knows the situation. The East Sea region failed in their operation and even had a skirmish with the Columbia Navy. The situation is not optimistic, and it is even possible that the Columbia Navy will discover the location of the source of God. The region has decided to join forces with the East Sea region to search for the source of God together." Upon hearing this, everyone couldn't help but frown. If the Columbia Navy were to obtain the source of God again, it would mean that they would have 2 Epsilon-class mutants. That would not be good news for the Huashu Kingdom as a whole. How did they find out? Deng Shintong asked in puzzlement. The East Sea region would not act so recklessly and be discovered so easily, Lan Xincheng said with a hint of schadenfreude. You can't be sure. The Columbia Navy is not incompetent. They wanted to stab us in the back and act on their own. This is retribution. Zhu Jing glanced at him, and Lan Xincheng immediately shut up. Zhu Jing continued, "This time, both sides will send out a group of top-notch mutants to participate in the mission. My opinion is that since our strength is weaker than the Columbia Navy and the East Sea region, we need to pool our resources and do something big. Therefore, every investigation team must be dispatched." Zhang Yi had a stack of documents in front of him, all kinds of information collected from the Jiangnan region. He casually flipped through them, and there was even some information on the mutants from the East Sea region and the Columbia Navy. Azure Dragon, real name Su Xiaolong, former Marine Corps Major. A beast-type ability user, with unknown abilities, suspected to be a giant sea beast. Zhang Yi flipped through the information in his hands while listening to Zhu Jing's speech. Zhang Yi actually knew everything Zhu Jing had said. The rest was nothing more than clichés. This time, our headquarters will send someone to the mission area with someone from the East Sea region. Whichever party discovers the source of God first will get 60%, and the other party will get 40%. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi asked indifferently, "Commander Zhu, can the source of God be divided?" Zhu Jing laughed, "We don't know the answer to that either." Everyone present had strange looks on their faces. If they didn't even know what the source of God was, the information was too scarce. Zhu Jing said, "So in order to solve this problem, we have also come up with a solution. If the source of God really cannot be divided, then it will have to be paid for with the corresponding resources." Deng Shintong countered, "But nothing can be more valuable than an Epsilon-class mutant, right?" Lan Xincheng answered for Zhu Zheng, "If the quality is not good enough, we can make up for it in quantity. Chapter 934, Refusal to Team Up. This answer from Wan Qingchen caused every captain to smile mockingly. It was a beautiful speech, but who would want to get their hands on the source of God and become a higher-level Epsilon-class mutant? Gluttony crossed his arms and said nonchalantly, in other words, our primary objective is to seize the source of God. Then we'll give them the corresponding supplies and be done. Xu Zheng's gaze became deep. In theory, that is indeed correct. This mission is not going to be easy. The East Sea region is a war zone, and the number and strength of the top Mutanis there is higher than ours. So be careful in everything you do. If you get the chance, you can use the source of God directly. In short, whoever has the ability to do so, go ahead and use the source of God. Xu Zheng had to say this. Because by that time, even if he strictly forbade it, the captains would not listen to him. Zhang Yi's heart twitched slightly, and he glanced at Zhu Zheng. At the beginning, Zhu Zheng had promised to give him priority in using the source of God. But now, he was saying something different. Zhu Zheng pretended not to see Zhang Yi's gaze. The decision has been made. Tomorrow, at 7 a.m. sharp, we will depart for the East Sea region. And then we will head to the mission area. You must all adjust yourselves. And be prepared for a clash with the forces around you. The group nodded without offering any further comments. After arriving on Star Island, everyone would rely on their own abilities. In the end, it would come down to strength and a bit of luck. No one was a novice, and there was no need to ask unnecessary questions. Naturally, the military region also opened up supplies of all the weapons and equipment needed for this mission, except for Zhang Yi. The meeting ended in less than 20 minutes, clean and decisive. Zhang Yi didn't say a word from beginning to end. Because he had been a participant from the beginning, he could imagine the situation as it was today. After everyone had left, he caught up with Zhu Zheng. Commander Zhu Zheng looked back at Zhang Yi, his eyes not at all surprised. I knew you'd come. It may be difficult to do what I promised you before. We're not in control of the battlefield, so you'll have to fight for it yourself. But if you need anything else, just let me know. Zhang Yi shook his head. That wasn't why he'd come. He knew about Zhu Zheng's difficulties, and he didn't care. I haven't thought of anything I need yet, so I'll let you know if I do. But I have one request. This time, I won't bring Bai Li Changqing and the others with me. I'll go alone. Zhu Zheng and Sun Lushuan looked at Zhang Yi with surprise. Just you going alone? Zhu Zheng asked. Do you know that the place is very dangerous? Apart from the highly corrosive poisonous miasma everywhere, you also need to pass through the blockade of the Columbia Navy. There is a high possibility that our actions will be discovered. Although I know that you are very good at defending yourself, it is still too dangerous for one person to go to an area where there is no way to tell which direction is which and where poisonous miasma is everywhere. Zhang Yi nodded. I know all of this. But precisely because I know it, I don't want to bring anyone else with me. My abilities are more geared towards defensive counterattacks and assassinations. I am happier acting alone. Teamwork and the like have never been my strong suit. Besides, there are so many captains there, and too many people is not necessarily a good thing. Zhu Zheng nodded after considering it for a while. It's true, you haven't had enough time to bond with the team. I can also see that you don't want to be a leader at all. In that case, it's fine if you go. However, Bai Li Changqing will be sad. Zhang Yi slightly pursed his lips. He can join another team. I believe that with his strength, he can easily become the vice captain. Zhu Zheng crossed his arms and said sternly, he hasn't been in contact with the other teams either, and even if he goes, it would be very dangerous for him to suddenly participate in such an important operation. Zhang Yi smiled slightly, you just make the arrangements. Zhu Zheng had no choice. Fine. Since you insist, then I will respect your opinion. Anyway, with your strength and style of doing things, even if you act alone, I believe you can excel. Zhang Yi nodded with a smile. Thank you, Commander Zhu. Zhang Yi went to the quartermaster's office alone to receive a large amount of supplies. It was nothing more than tons and tons of heavy weapons, hundreds of tons of TNT and C4 explosives, medicine for treating injuries, antidotes, and a large amount of food. In short, he filled the quota. After all, he was not going to take anything from Blizzard City for free, and he would not lose out if he took it. Everyone else had to be careful, for fear of carrying too much supplies and affecting the battle. Zhang Yi, on the other hand, was afraid that the amount would not be enough. Just as he was collecting supplies, Bai Li Changqing suddenly came over. "Captain Chaos, I want to talk to you." Bai Li Changqing glanced at the quartermaster next to him and said to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi glanced at Bai Li Changqing and said, "About the mission?" "That's right. Why did you choose to act alone? And none of us are you taking?" Bai Li Changqing's expression was a bit ugly. After the Battle of Eclipse Moon, he and the rest of the team had never received a decent mission again. If this continued, his men would be wasted. Zhang Yi said indifferently, "I can't tell you the details of the mission, but remember, I'm doing this for your own good." He was just joking. He just felt that bringing these guys along would be more trouble. Bai Li Changqing froze for a moment. His brows furrowed slightly, and his expression was hesitant. After a long while, he cautiously asked, "Is it a very dangerous mission?" Zhang Yi said, "Can't you see who's attending the meeting? This mission is more important than you can imagine. Even if you go, you'll be in great danger, not to mention the others in the team." Bai Li Changqing said with some confusion, "But it seems that the members of the other investigation team are also going to participate in the operation." Zhang Yi said, "But you should also know what kind of person I am. We are friends, right?" Bai Li Changqing scratched his head and said, Zhang Yi said with a smile, "But if we really encounter danger, I probably won't be able to look after you. You guys have very good professional ethics, but I'm used to being a lone wolf. I'm not Bian Junwu, I don't have a great sense of sacrifice. So I suggest that we can be friends in private, we can drink and chat together when we're not busy. But if we really go to war, don't make me your comrade in arms." He gave Bai Li Changqing's shoulder a light punch. "Let's not talk about that, our friendship won't change." Bai Li Changqing touched his shoulder as Zhang Yi had already left the quartermaster's office after taking stock of the supplies. He was left alone there, feeling dejected. Chapter 935, I Only Believe in Myself. Zhang Yi's behavior in Blizzard City this time was exactly like that of a lone wolf. He didn't say much from the beginning of the meeting. After the mission was over, he also quietly collected the supplies by himself and returned to his accommodation to feed the cats and dogs. This attitude surprised many people. However, when they thought about Zhang Yi's previous experience at sea, they thought that he might not have recovered from that experience yet, so they all felt that it was understandable. For this mission, the Jiangnan region was naturally very concerned, and adequate preparations were made in all other aspects. I will not go into detail here. In short, in order to complete the search, the deputy head of the operations department, Situ Xian, was sent to lead the team, and 500 professional investigators were arranged to accompany them. That night, Zhu Zheng's office was still brightly lit. He was sitting at his desk, his hands crossed behind his chin, his tightly furrowed brows indicating his state of mind. He harbored great ambitions for this mission. However, the reality was that it would be incredibly difficult to achieve his goals. The key point was that he did not have a strong enough force at his disposal. Of the 5 major investigation teams today, the Night Raven squad had just been formed, and the Tengu squad was in disarray due to Zhang Yi's Buddhist-like attitude. If they really went to Star Island, they would be hard-pressed to form an effective fighting force. The most critical thing was that they did not have a suitable leader to lead the team and support the entire team. Ding dong. An electronic voice prompt sounded. "Zhu Shuai, Captain Jingwei of the Night Raven squad requests an audience with you." Upon hearing the words Spirit Guardian, Zhu Jing immediately said, "Send her in." Soon after, Spirit Guardian, dressed in black combat fatigues and with her eyes covered by a layer of black gauze, arrived in front of Zhu Zheng. "Commander Zhu." Her voice was cold, as if she were an emotionless machine. Zhu Jing looked at Spirit Guardian and said leisurely, "Have you met the person today?" Spirit Guardian nodded. "I have. He feels very strong." Zhu Jing nodded. "Don't forget your mission. He is an absolute conservative, and it will be safest for you to stay close to him during this operation." "But," Zhu Jing's gaze flashed with a glimmer of light, "if necessary, you can use him. After all, the source of God is something that is very important to the region." Spirit Guardian raised his right hand to the position of his temple. "Yes, Commander Zhu. I am very clear about my mission." Zhang Yi returned to his residence in Blizzard City with a large amount of supplies. Flower and Lele were waiting for him here. The first thing Zhang Yi did after returning home was prepare food for them. Both guys had a huge appetite. Flower was lucky in that it didn't need a lot of energy before transforming and fighting. But after every battle, it would eat the equivalent of dozens of people's portions. Not just Flower, in fact, Zhang Yi and Liang Yu and everyone else were the same. Now the energy consumed by supernatural abilities is converted from food. The higher the level of the mutant, the higher the energy requirements for food intake. Fortunately, Zhang Yi's dimensional space was well stocked. Otherwise, if they continued to develop in their current state, food might not last for decades. For ordinary wild mutants, even if they have high talent, they would be afraid to fight with others or unable to get sufficient energy supplies due to food scarcity. Fortunately, the Jiangnan region was well supplied. They had adopted special food production and processing methods that could support a growing population. Feeding the mutants was no problem at all. That was why Zhang Yi took as much as he could whenever he came to collect supplies. To put it in a joking way, each time a mutant like Zhang Yi went into action, the energy consumed might be no less than that of deploying a large battleship. Mutants have become a strategic weapon in the new era, expensive but with extremely high cost performance. The only good news is that they don't need much maintenance. Zhang Yi sat on the sofa, prepared a small mountain of food and drinking water for them, and then sat on the sofa and pulled a burger and Coke out of dimensional space and ate it himself. His expression was very indifferent. This was very different from the Blizzard City units at all levels, which were now busy as hell. And all of this was simply because he knew one thing clearly at this moment in time. That was that during the rest of the trip to Star Island, it would be difficult for the greater region to help them in any way. And it would be unrealistic to expect help from the East Sea region, which was the main party responsible for this operation. He had to rely on himself to get everything he wanted. What's more, he sensed something amiss in Zhu Zheng's attitude. Not only because Zhu Zheng had forgotten his previous promises. It was because Zhu Zheng had not appointed him as the overall leader of this operation. If one thinks conventionally, it is clear that the strength of the Jiangnan region is weaker than that of the Columbia Navy and the East Sea region. The best approach is to pool our resources and work together. With him, the strongest person in the Jiangnan region at the moment, leading the team, the 5 investigation teams acting in unison would be the best option. However, Zhu Zheng had not mentioned a word about this. This shows that Zhu Zheng is still somewhat on his guard against Zhang Yi. This cannot be considered a mistake. He is the supreme commander of the region, and just half a year ago he was betrayed by trusted subordinates. Therefore, Zhu Zheng does not want to see Zhang Yi become too powerful. I'm just a little curious. Apart from relying on me, who else can he rely on? Zhang Yi frowned while eating his burger, utterly baffled. Zhu Zheng needed a strong power as the basis of his power. And basically everyone on the other investigation teams had the relevant power behind them in Blizzard City. The growth of either side would make Zhu Zheng uneasy. Because of this, Zhang Yi's presence was extremely precious. Zhang Yi knew that unless a new mutant appeared who was easier to control than him and also had strength that was not inferior to his, Zhu Zheng's attitude would not change so quickly. Could it be that during the 5 months I was gone, he discovered a new seed? It's very possible. Zhang Yi took a bite of his burger, his dark pupils shining in the night. Soon, he raised the corners of his mouth. This makes perfect sense. This is how the supreme commander of a large region should act. Trust no one, only the power in your hands. Zhang Yi felt no sense of loss. He and Zhu Xing had only been using each other. He had cooperated with Zhu Zheng's work because Zhu Xing could provide him with the greatest convenience in this position. I'm afraid you've made a miscalculation this time, Zhang Yi said indifferently.